Hello there, this is Jeff Erdman, E.D.S. Inc. Shandon, and we have another little episode for you today. We need to use the lathe so that we can make a plug for doing our broaching on the fan wheel. So I'm going to have to make one of those. But unfortunately, I'd started another little project some time ago that I've got currently in the lathe, and I never finished it. So it has to be done and completed before, obviously, I can move forward with making the plug that I need to make. What I've got is pretty much rough cut for now, and I need to go back through and make all the finish cuts. It's kind of a production job because it's multiple pieces all being cut at one time. They're all going to be about 1.5 inch pieces, 2 inch pieces, something like that. I can't remember. I'll get that dimension for you before we're all done here and show you what it is. And what these parts are for conduit. And typically you have a part that you screw into your conduit that you can put into your box, your flexible conduit. Let's call it that. Here, I'll grab a piece of it. This is your standard flex conduit, and you'd have a little part that would screw right into that, no problem. Go into your box, you'd have a nut on it, and tighten that up to your box for your electrical wiring. Well, I went and I bought a whole bunch of stainless steel flexible, I can't call it conduit because it wasn't conduit originally, I'm sure, but it's flexible tubing. It's very similar to this. Let me grab a piece of it. This is a piece of that conduit, and it's all stainless steel, and it has the ribs on it just like the other flex conduit does, except it's a solid piece. This is not a twisted section. In other words, it won't unravel like regular conduit would. This is made of a solid piece, so you could actually use this for fluids because it's solid. But we're going to be using it for conduit in our shop. I've already made some of these little parts that need to go in here because this size, this inside dimension, is not the same as the inside dimension of your regular flex conduit. So thus those parts will not work, and we can't modify them. So anyway, what we're making here are some little parts for that stainless steel conduit. I'll go grab you a part, bring it back, and show you what the finished product's going to look like. And because I've made a sample part that I've tested and it works perfectly. And when I come back, then I'll show you what I got on the lathe and how I've got it set up. So this is the part that I'm making, and this end of it takes the standard nuts for conduit. So I can just use that and it works perfectly. But I had to change this diameter and thread this to match the conduit that I have. So now I can take this and I can screw it right in to that tight. And so that works perfectly. So I've got a whole mess of these that I have to make. And of course you have to make sure that you're all clean on the inside, because when you run wires through here, you don't want the wires to end up being frayed by these parts at all. So anyway, that's what we're making. I'll take you up by the lathe and I'll show you what I have set up now and how I'm doing a production run of these little items. So this is my setup. I've got that extended all the way out. I've got it on centers. I've got a support here because this material sags too much in the center. So I have to move that back and forth depending upon where I'm cutting. You can see where I've run it up against this part here, and now I've got it over here so I can get these parts cleaned up. So I do have some finish done. This is finished, this is finished, and this part, these basically from here to this point are all finished finished to the diameter that they need to be. I need to get the one on the far left needs to be cleaned up yet. I'm not sure why I didn't do that before. There's probably a reason for it, but I can't remember what it is. And then we have these here that we have to get cleaned up, and then we can move things around. I may, before we move this, go ahead and thread everything down here. So once I move this setup, I don't have to come back and change things up again. So I can just go ahead and finish that end. Then once we finish with our taking things down to size and threading them, then we have to bore those and cut them off. And then put them all back into the lathe and clean up the ends so that there's no sharp edges. So that's what we kind of have to do, and that's what the job is this evening. Okay, so the next thing to do is to make these threads on my part. Okay, and now on a regular part, you notice that the threads are raised. On this one here, they're not raised, they're inset. Okay, and what I've done is I've found I have a collection of cutters, and what I found is that I have a little radius cutter that works great for doing that cut. So this is what I'm using to make that cut, and I found that this works perfectly in that conduit. So it took a little bit of experimentation to get the right thread. I know what the total number of threads are per inch. I'll have to look at that before I set up. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. I believe it's 6. I think it's 6 threads per inch. But using this cutter, I get those just perfectly, and this threads into that conduit just beautifully. So if I do this right, we'll have a nice project when we're done. So anyway, that's what we're going to do now, is we're going to thread this section of all the parts. Okay, we have determined that our threads are 6. We're going to take that back to this point, so I'm going to set that as my 0. Okay, so this will be our first cut. Let's see how she does. We're finishing up those little parts. As soon as we get these parts done on our, these little parts that I'm doing for my conduit, then I have to get the plug made so that I can do the broaching on the fan. I want to do that before I weld in the blades, because it'll be harder to get at once those blades are in. It'll be a little bit more complicated trying to broach that after the blades are in. So I want to do it pre-welding for blades, is what I want to say. And so I've got that fan to finish. I've got the motor in now. I can actually try it onto the arbor of the motor to make sure it fits, which I'm pretty sure it will without any problem. And then once we get that broached, and I checked, I made a mistake on ordering my keys. I didn't have any 3/8 keys, so I went to McMaster-Carr, and I wanted stainless steel because I'm dealing with aluminum and steel. The arbor is steel, and the fan is aluminum. And I thought, I think stainless would be the best alloy to deal with between the two metals and electrolysis and what have you. So anyway, long story short, I ordered some stainless steel 3/8 keys from McMaster-Carr, got them in, and man, they were sloppy as all get out. And I thought, well, maybe I mismeasured my shaft, the keyway in the shaft. And I checked that out, it was 3/8. And I thought, well, let me measure the keys. And I measured the keys, and they were undersized. And I thought, what in the world? And so I went back to my order, and I didn't realize that you can order undersized or oversized keys. And I ordered undersized. So I got in a hurry, didn't read the fine print, I guess, and so I got smaller than what I needed. I really needed the oversized key, to be honest with you. So that's what I ended up having to do, is reorder that key. So now I do have a key that fits nice and tight on the arbor, and now we just have to broach the fan itself for that. So I'm learning as we go. I'm learning that there's little details that I have to pay attention to. I hope you enjoy the journey as well. Okay, so I've got this all threaded. It's ready to drill and to part off. And I have a little bit of a problem that's bothering me. So I'm going to take you over and show you what that is and what I'm going to do about it. So let me take you over to my table. Okay, so this is my steady rest right here. And what my real issue is the way that this is clamped on to the unit. What we have here we have a threaded shaft that has a nut on two ends. So when I'm trying to tighten it down from the top, this will spin, this bottom will spin. And so I can't get her tight. I have to put a wrench on the bottom, and that unit is tucked up inside this. And so that being said, it makes it very difficult to get a wrench up in there and to tighten it. So it's been kind of a little bit of a frustration, and I finally decided I'm going to do something about it. So here's what I'm going to do. I found a little piece of bar stock. This is about a 1/2 inch bar stock, and it fits just perfectly in here. So I'm going to take and I'm going to cut this section out of it right here, this part that has no holes in it. I don't know what this bar was used for before, but then I'm going to drill and tap a hole in the center of this thing, and then this will be thread into it, and I'll weld it to the base of this, and that way it can never turn, it can never come out. And then I'll have something that while this is in here, it won't spin on me, and I'll be able to tighten my top down, which has been the problem. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'll take you along on that little trip. Okay, we're over on the little E.D.S, and we're going to go ahead and get this cutting. E.D.S does a nice job for me. I paid a lot more for it than I did for the Ballet, which has more features than this one. But this is kind of a nice quick setup. The other one's pretty quick too, but this is sitting out here. I'd have to move the other one to get it cut. So does a nice job, relatively quick. Okay, we're back from the bandsaw and the grinder. I've taken this and I just lightly hit all the corners with the grinder a little bit, so we'd have no sharp edges after cutting. And if you notice too, I also radius this, because your casting on your bracket on the bottom of your steady rest has a little bit of a radius, so the square corners wouldn't fit tight up against there. So I decided to go ahead and I just kind of radius those corners a little bit. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to measure over. We got 3 3/4. So that's going to be 1 7/8 to center. So I'm going to go ahead and get my Starrett combination square over here. We'll just take and scratch this. Okay, so now we have a mark. Again, this doesn't have to be perfectly accurate. We're just dealing with And then our center line is going to be at 3/4 of an inch. We're at 1.5, so 3/4 will be our center. Okay, so now we'll just get some a center punch, and we'll hit that real quick. Let me go grab that while you wait. So this is a metric thread and everything. So what I found is I found 5/8 works just about right. I didn't have any bolts that were the right side, but size. But I've got this that we use for a brain dead. At any rate, we'll be using this, tapping this part, screwing this down into it. Then I'll put a tack weld on each side and weld up the bottom of it. I'll probably leave this just a little bit short and then build up a weld around it and finish it out. So that's the intent here. That's what we plan to do. Okay, the bracket that I made for the bottom was still hitting the casting, so I'm taking a little bit off of one edge with the milling machine. This is my last pass. I've already done the other side. So basically, this is what I've done to it. Now let's look at this edge. You can see how I've taken just a little bit off of there. So now see if it'll focus on there. You can see just a little bit taken off on each edge. And hopefully I'll be able to seat that right down. I'm going to try it now and see if it seats flush. No, we didn't quite get it deep enough, so we're going to have to run through it another couple of times. Okay, so we've got our part completed. It's I found some blue paint. It's not a perfect match, but it's not going to be seen anyway. It's going to be at the bottom of this. So this fits in like so. The paint's still a little bit wet, so I don't want to touch it. And it has a nice tight fit in there. Now that thing won't turn when I put my screws over the top. And that'll be a much better deal for me. This last one, both of these had nuts on both sides. It had a nut on this side, a nut on this side. You turn one and you start to turn the other, you could never get it tight. So wasn't very happy with that. This should be just fine and dandy here. Yeah, that'll work just fine. So that's the fix on the steady rest. Now I want to point something out to you. That used to be a shop rag, and I used that rag to clean that part with acetone. Now I tossed that about 4 feet away from me, and when I started welding, I don't know if a little spark popped over there 4 feet away and hit that rag, or if the fumes caught on fire from the acetone. But that just gives you an idea of how volatile that acetone was. I had it back behind my Ajax mill, and all I saw is this big flame coming up from back there. Now, if I hadn't have seen that, it could have caught some of the oil or grease on fire around the machine and then caused a bigger issue. But the point being is I should have been a little bit more careful. And so I hope you are too in your shop. Next time I'll make sure that rag is in the flammable container rather than laying out where flame could catch it. Okay, so we've got our part in. What I'm going to do is start drilling and parting these off, and that way we can get rid of the steady wet rust as I get closer down to this end, because it's kind of hard to work around at times, so especially when you're trying to get up to it. So we'll just start working our way down. We'll start drilling through here and getting our parts done and move forward. There we go. Now it's just rinse and repeat, guys. I have to drill this back down into here, which I've got probably another 3/4 of an inch to an inch to go. I drilled to about this point on this. So we'll have to drill this to here, and we can cut this part off here, and then we can move the steady rest back and do the next part and just keep working back until we're done. So just rinse and repeat. Well, there we go. We got a mess of little parts there made. So job done. Now I can go back to my other work. I still have to make a couple of nuts. Got a part in the lathe right now that I can use to make those nuts, so I'll probably do that next. And the problem about the nuts is that there were 2 of those that I made a little bit too narrow, so I have to make some nuts that'll fit them. But otherwise, they all work well.